Now, if you are an ME-CFS patient, chances are that at some point you've been told that your problems are psychological, or perhaps you've been told that your problems are due to deconditioning. And it's persisted despite, so many findings that support the idea of an illness of exercise intolerance, like low blood volume or microclots. But one thing that's never been done up until very recently is to actually develop a research study to actually prove or disprove whether deconditioning is the cause of ME-CFS. And in today's video, I'm going to be telling you about a very recent and very interesting paper which set out to do just that. But first, my name is Patrick Usher, and I am author of the book Understanding ME-CFS, which breaks down some of the latest, most exciting research into the condition, as well as talking about treatment strategies that I have tried in order to improve my own quality of life as an ME-CFS patient. The links for that book are down below. So before we get to that study, it's worth just a few more comments on this idea that ME-CFS is caused by deconditioning. And when I think about this argument, there's a few things that come to mind. One is that it's literally lowest common denominator thinking, because it strikes me as a case of people are looking at ME-CFS patients from the outside. They see that they're lying down a lot. They see that they're in bed a lot. Sometimes they're in bed all the time. And rather than being curious as to why someone would be in that situation, or listen to them when they say that actually they feel physically incapable of actually performing activity beyond a certain point without a devastating reaction. So rather than listening to what people are saying and going back to the scientific drawing board and saying, what's going on here? They actually just say, the problem must be that they're lying down. So it's actually looking at the consequence of the illness as being its cause. And this is like a major cop-out in terms of having that interest or curiosity about what could possibly cause someone to do that. So that's one thing that I've often thought about it. And the second thing is, it's a real blame the victim approach to medicine. This person is lying down a lot, they're causing their own problems, all they need to do is get up and take exercise. It almost seems to be like, rather than, again, an attempt to inquire scientifically as to why this is the case, it's a kind of almost knee-jerk, quasi-narcissistic or even narcissistic reaction to someone suffering, and just blame them for it, and then find reasons to actually rationalise that blaming. So it's been a big problem, and it's like the biggest mismatch between patient experience and also the physiological reality that underpins that experience and what a doctor is prescribing as the supposed remedy. It's the biggest mismatch that you could ever potentially hope to find between the two. So with that said, it's very important that we have research that actually directly takes and tackles this misconception head on. And this is what was achieved in the paper that we're talking about today. So that paper was from the Netherlands by Rob Wust, Appelman et al. And it was called Skeletal Muscle Properties in Long COVID and ME-CFS Differ from Those Induced by Bed Rest. And it's currently in a preprint and was posted in early May 2025. And I have to say, this paper is actually quite complex. As a study, it raised even larger questions about some aspects of ME-CFS that I might go into in another video, but I'm going to stay focused on the deconditioning point here. And I've read through the paper, and I'm also relying on Court Johnson's write-up, which was very good, and which I link down below, which also includes an interview of Rob Wust with David Tuller, which is well worth watching. So how this study was set up was it had two groups. One was ME-CFS and long COVID patients, and then the other was a group of healthy controls, 24 people, who agreed to actually have 60 days total bed rest. And so both of these groups were studied for their respective exercise capacity, their ventilatory capacity, their aerobic capacity, blood perfusion into the muscles, mitochondrial situation in the muscles, a range of factors that determine someone's exercise response. If we're thinking about a study to prove or disprove the hypothesis that ME-CFS is caused by deconditioning, you couldn't really get a better one, because 60 days of just total bed rest is going to leave someone so profoundly deconditioned. It's a way of showing what exactly deconditioning is capable of. And when we think of a lot of ME-CFS patients, some of us are bedridden like that, but many of us are still engaging in physical activity to whatever extent that we can. Like, this study takes deconditioning to the extreme and just shows exactly what deconditioning can do. And therefore, if those findings do not correlate with what is seen in ME-CFS, then you can definitively say that ME-CFS is not caused in and of itself by deconditioning. So from that point of view, this study is very well set up to take on this misconception. So that's how it was designed, and I'm just going to read you now some of the main conclusions, and then we'll pick up on a few of the specifics of the paper. So 2 quotes in terms of conclusions. The first being, the major finding of the present study is that acute exercise responses and skeletal muscle alterations in long COVID and ME-CFS differ from those caused by bed rest induced deconditioning per se, i.e. in and of themselves. These findings challenge the notion that deconditioning is the primary driver of reduced exercise capacity in long COVID and ME-CFS. Our observations suggest intrinsic skeletal muscle abnormalities contribute to limited exercise capacity, including reduced capillary supply relative to muscle fibre size and mitochondrial impairments. Similarly, they finish the paper saying, our findings indicate that the lower exercise capacity in patients with long COVID and ME-CFS is not solely due to physical inactivity, and therefore rehabilitation strategies for patients should consider that patients with ME-CFS and long COVID are not simply deconditioned and should be treated as unique cases with alternative rehabilitation strategies. So therefore, at a big picture level, we see that this study directly contradicts the idea that ME-CFS and long COVID are simply caused by deconditioning. Now, I'm going to tell you 4 ways, more specifically, in which that was established. The first relates to mitochondrial function. So in the bed rest group, the quantity of the mitochondria diminished, which is what you would expect in the context of bed rest. But when that group were then subjected to the exercise challenges after their period of deconditioning, the mitochondria still responded in a healthy way to the challenge of the exercise. And so basically, even though the mitochondrial pool had lowered its quantities, it was still able to actually respond to the challenge of exercise appropriately. And this is not the case in ME-CFS, where the mitochondria actually, cannot meet the demand of the physical activity. So at a deep cellular level, there was a difference observed. Another difference came from the response of the heart rate elevation to the physical exercise challenge. In the ME-CFS group, the heart rate increase was much than in the people who were deconditioned. And this suggests that there's something about, what's going on systemically in ME-CFS that makes the cardiovascular system respond in a more pronounced way in the effort to take physical activity, or shall we say perhaps in a way that compensates even more. And this could be to do with low blood volume, oxygen extraction, microclots and all of that kind of thing, placing further strain on the cardiovascular system. The third way in which the deconditioned patients differed from the ME-CFS long COVID patients referred to the amount of capillaries, or very small blood vessels, that were actually feeding blood to the muscle fibres. What was interesting here is that in the ME-CFS long COVID group, there was a reduction in the amount of blood vessel capillaries, whereas this was not observed in the deconditioned group. And interestingly, Rob Wust points out that in fact, the overall capillary density increased in the deconditioned group, and that this is consistent with the principle that alterations in muscle size typically occur before capillary alterations. So in the deconditioned group, their muscles became very atrophied, but we did not see as part of that process the capillaries actually reducing. Whereas in ME-CFS, there's something about the nature of the illness itself which is causing the reduction in capillaries, and therefore the blood perfusion into the muscles. And finally, another difference between the 2 groups was that the ME-CFS patients have a reduction in a certain kind of type 1 muscle fibre. And type 1 muscle fibres are the red meat muscle fibres, which are more capable of performing sustained endurance, so kind of keeping going during a physical activity. Those muscle fibres were reduced, and there was an over-reliance on type 2 muscle fibres, or fast twitch muscle fibres, which use up energy quite quickly in short bursts. And that kind of makes sense as an alteration when we think of the nature of ME-CFS, that we actually, cannot sustain activity. It's often the recycling of energy that is the problem. So in all four of these areas, the mitochondrial response, the cardiovascular response, the quantity and density of the capillaries feeding the muscles, and in the kinds of muscle fibres that we have, all of these areas were actually different. And so for those of us who may be scientifically minded, whether inside or outside the scientific community, this study in and of itself should put to bed this kind of idea that ME-CFS patients are often told that their problems are simply due to actually not taking enough physical activity. Whether or not this kind of filters through to people who are currently giving that kind of quote-unquote advice is, of course, another thing altogether. So I found this paper to be very interesting, and I think it is a very important contribution to taking on some real misunderstandings about ME-CFS, and I hope that over time it will play its part in the general atmosphere around ME-CFS when patients present to their doctors. I found this paper very interesting. It also raises other questions, as I say, which you can read about in Court Johnson's write-up of the article. Please go and have a look at that. But for the moment, that's it for this video. Please leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see you in the next one.